A lot of people don't even know that, you might not even know this, Matt, that we didn't even have a legacy team before he came and spoke at that event. I knew it was a role in the Bible, that there was a gift of giving. And so we had all these other dream team functions. I mean, you could sing and you could greet and you could lead a small group. But when people would even ask me, hey, what do I do in the gift of giving? I was like, we don't have a role for that, because I didn't know how to build it. And really, I knew God was sending you to help us build this legacy team. One of the things I want to do on the podcast today is kind of define really two things. I want to define what is a legacy team, how do you build one, and then let's get into the weeds a little bit about how ours operates in the time that we have allotted, because we define the legacy team as people who serve on the dream team by strategically investing their resources over and above their tithe to accelerate the vision of the church. This will be in the show notes if people want that full definition, but I'll read it again. So they're a dream team function, just like a worship team member or a small group leader. But their unique role is they're strategically investing resources, but not their tithe, because the tithe is already the Lord's. So you can't give what doesn't belong to you. You're not even giving if you're tithing, in my opinion. So you're giving over and above your tithe. And here's the cool part. You already said it. They don't determine the vision. They can accelerate the vision of the church. And so we have 5 ways that we build this team that we'll pass on to you today. And the first is we invite people with the gift of giving to join us. And of course we do that. One of the ways we do that is in our growth track, when we're inviting people to do whatever function they have in our church as they identify their gifts. Matt, you're a part of this every week in step 2 and step 3
absolutely.
Of your campus. I mean, describe what that looks like a little bit at your campus, that growth track night when we're asking them to be a part, and then how this is one of the places they could choose.
In that environment, it's no different from any other place in the church where anyone else would serve, so we'll go through a list of all the teams available, and we'll do a spiritual gifts and personality assessment. And there's just some people, and they know it already. They may not have ever said, hey, I have the spiritual gift of giving, but they've always been probably just more generous than their friends, wanted to lean in and support things financially. And one of the things that Lee really helped us with, just as a campus pastor, is I can remember having lunches with a business guy or somebody who and there was this tension and this awkwardness between me as a pastor and them as a business guy, and they were intimidated too, and never even knew that. But the way the legacy team helps out so much is puts language around for both parties, for the business person, also for the pastor, language around how to be involved with giving. And then we have a whole lot of opportunities for people to jump in. We do lunches. I do lunches on the 4th Sunday of every month, where I'll just grab a couple people on the legacy team and have lunch with them, have a sandwich with them, and Lee will stop by and help explain vision. And so there's plenty of ample opportunity for people to self-identify and say, hey, I want to be on that team.
So people are listening, Lee, and they're thinking, okay, I obviously want this. I've never met a pastor who doesn't want people on the legacy team. How do they invite them? What do you do?
Yeah, number one is you have to start somewhere, and you start really you could look at historical giving or look at list of people that maybe have the ability to give, but you have to start somewhere. So if you have a growth track, a simulation model where you're taking people through steps to discover that gift, there are people with the gift of worship. There are people with the gift of generosity. God's called us all to worship, but there are people with that gift. And so to identify that, you have to start by assessing what I would say, go through your historical giving. And I would say align a cutoff number. And there's a methodology that I'd suggest people use. It's not law, but it's a great start. Because many of you are saying, okay, I've never done this before. How do I even know who do I invite to the first interest meeting of this?
Right.
Because you need to unpack it. And if you took your median income in your community, you can find that at Chamber of Commerce or on Google. Take the median income. If it's, let's say, $50,000. Add 30% to that number, and that would make it $65,000. Then take that 65 aggregate number times 10%. That gives you a number of 6,500. That's an annualized giving cutoff. That's a starting point of someone who would be in your church giving over and above. Again, you use it as a starting point, but you also assess and say, who really needs to be in the room? That's probably the greatest question, is who needs to be in the room, and then unpack what it is to have a legacy team. I didn't even know, I've never said this, I didn't even know it was a spiritual gift until you told me 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had read Romans 12 100 times, but I had a rhema moment, an aha moment, right? Well, if we assess the group we invite and have an interest meeting and unpack vision, simply saying, you know what, guys, there are spiritual gifts. There are spiritual gifts with those with worship, with administration, with all these different areas. And in our church, you said this in our April 2015 gathering. You said, guys, I didn't know what to do with y'all.
Yep.
You know, somebody wants to park a car, somebody wants it, but there are those specifically with that gift of generosity. So you identify them, but first you have to have vision for it.
Yeah.
If you don't have vision for it, it's going to come across as mechanical and almost transactional.
Yep.
And so you've got to have a plan to unpack vision. You've got to assess who needs to be invited and let them know that it's a team. You touched on that. It being a part of a team, it's not about just the individual person, because really legacy is not about money. It's about helping people fulfill what God's created them to do in the gift of the giving of finance.